think they got bigger problems, but you know what? I think if we get them to Craig's auction, that we can bring both sides together and we can break bread over a Hemi. What do you think? Okay. All right, and we are live. Welcome again back to the Petersen Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, California. And I am excited for today for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is, you guys, we're doing something different today. For the past couple of months, we have met the key people shaping the car world. And the people shaping the car world that we've met thus far have been people in the new car world. People that have made and developed and designed and built cool cars. We've met people who've raced cool cars. But we've never met somebody from the classic car world. And that's where we're going to do something very different today. So, how many of you guys have been to a classic car event? Actually, virtually all of you. Okay. So, you know about the Goodwood Festival of Speeds, events like that. But in our country here, we have three major bellwether events. We've got Pebble Beach, which started as a race and a charity car show in 1950. And then in 1996, a major car guy somewhere in Florida decided to start what's become a fantastic show and two auctions in Amelia Island. But really the bellwether that starts the classic car calendar every year is in Scottsdale. And it's in Scottsdale where there's like, I think I've lost count, there's like 7 auctions, and now there's even a concours that came after the auctions, and it's what dictates the prices that are then in these kinds of books, the values of these cars. And that's why I'm excited about our guest today, because it's his auction and his family business that started everything in Scottsdale back in the late 60s and in 1971 with an auction of 80 cars. So without further ado, I want to introduce the CEO of Barrett-Jackson Auctions, Craig Jackson. Welcome to California, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. So one thing you guys actually don't know about me, I know you guys know I'm a proud New Yorker, but I'm also a proud Arizona State Sun Devil. So this is a bit of a homecoming for me to have a fellow Arizonan with me on my stage.
Well, thank you.
Sir, you have had quite an interesting journey. Now, most people
Hopefully it's not over.
Well, it depends on how you drive that car that's in the other room. Your journey, most people think it started in Scottsdale. Where did it actually start?
Well, my parents, I was born in Pontiac, Michigan. Both of my parents worked for General Motors. My father actually went to General Motors Tech, and my brother and my father started restoring cars before I was born. My brother's 14 years older, and they carried that passion. Actually, I think one of the pictures you have, they actually drove one of their classic cars to Scottsdale.
We do, actually,
in 1960. Yeah.
Actually, no, we'll get to that one. But what did they move to? What was the business that started in Scottsdale?
Well, they started this car wash. My father had a general store in Michigan after he left General Motors. My mom had a dress shop. They were both entrepreneurs. And then they started this car wash in Scottsdale, and my father restored classics, my brother raced cars, and we had a shop that my father worked on the classics, my brother worked on his race cars. There's some pictures of the cars.
But they weren't the only ones into cars.
Well, my dad bought me this Bantam when I was probably 10 years old, I think, and we restored it as a family project. And that's at our first car show. You just mentioned they started a concours in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
It all started as a car show. The concours is nothing new for Scottsdale. In fact, there was a lot of world-class cars that collectors like Tom Barrett, who was the nucleus of the car show with my father, had. And you can actually see the back of a 540K in that picture. Had both of Adolf Hitler's cars in the first car show. So it was pretty memorable for a local car.
But you show up with a small car. And did you actually win an award
I won
there?
my class, yes.
What was the class?
I can't remember. It was I've got the trophy at home. I can't even remember
Oh, you
what
still
the
have the trophy? Awesome.
I still have the trophy, yes.
So you won a trophy the first time you went to a car show, but in high school, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to race motorcycles, and I raced motocross for a lot of years. My father didn't help me support that habit. He thought I'd kill myself. So I had a couple of paper routes. I worked on motorcycles. I grew up in our shop, so I was very, and still am, very mechanically involved.
And that's from the family. Who restored this car?
Yes, my father and my brother restored this Cadillac, and they found it in a junkyard in Michigan and restored it as their project. They actually did it in their garage, and they drove this car out to Arizona from Michigan.
That's a hell of a family trip.
It is. We used to drive back there every year. We still have our family car in our collection. We have 2 cars that have been in our family for over 40 years. 36
Wow.
Ford, that was my brother's first car, and a 53 Cadillac Durham limousine that we used to drive back and forth to Michigan every summer.
But that wasn't the only trips you did. What did you do in the summer of 1967 with your family?
1967.
I'll give you a hint. It was a different continent.
Oh, we went to Europe, yes,
For a month.
for a month.
And did you go to the Louvre? Did you go to places like that?
We
Where'd you
went to
go?
all the different racetracks. We went to Le Mans. My brother was on the filming of the movie Grand Prix prior to that, and he sent back a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go, and it was one of those experiences that I remembered the rest of my
Yeah.
life. I was there for the last running across to hop in the cars, and that was the reason why my parents wanted to go that year and experience that.
So you were there when the 3 Fords were there,
Yes.
which now you sell at your auctions.
Yeah, I saw the winning car last week at Dan Gurney's shop.
That's awesome. Which this car, which the audience cannot see, but it's probably seen on Twitter, I've been ridiculous about putting that car up like a 13-year-old girl. I love that thing. And by the way, you're not getting it back. Another thing I'm a little bit jealous about, your brother got to hang out with some cool people.
Well, he met Phil a long time ago. They went and did the movie Grand Prix together through Europe. And then he went through the U.S. with Phil when they raced the Chaparrals. And I went to Stardust Racetrack in Las Vegas with them. Jim Hall had a bad wreck in one of the Chaparrals there, and went to Riverside with them when they raced there. So I actually saw the Chaparrals race back in the day and was
Wow.
in the pits with them.
And Brian, he had some success with the 409, didn't he?
He won the Winter Nationals in 1965 with a 65 Impala 409.
So the family has kind of done a lot. So you guys have done restorations, you've traveled to Europe, you've raced, and then you guys did some family vacations in the U.S., like you were saying, Michigan, but you also, were you going to like car shows like Pebble Beach at the time?
I went to Pebble since I was a kid. We used to do the caravans, the Grand Classic Caravan. Used to go to Hershey. All I can remember is it rained and there was mud every year, and I got to haul the wagon back and forth through all the rows looking for V16 and V12 Cadillac and Delahaye parts.
So that was your dad's focus. He liked those two types of cars.
Yeah, he liked multi-cylinder Cadillacs
Yeah.
and French-bodied cars.
And then he met a man by the name of Tom Barrett.
Yeah, and then we did this car show. That was the first car show in Arizona, and it was quite the Fiesta de los Autos Elegantes, the cowboy riding the Bugatti Royale.
So how would you describe Tom Barrett?
He was P.T. Barnum of the car world. He was very flamboyant, had 10,000 cars go through his hands in his lifetime.
Yeah.
His main thing was the chase for the car, and he chased cars all around the world. Once he acquired them, once they were in his garage, then everything was always for sale. And his goal every day was to buy and sell a car. That's what he loved to do. And it formed the nucleus for the first car show and auction.
my audience knows I'm a big James Bond fan. I love like spy and espionage kind of stuff. Tom Barrett seemed to like that as well and figured go on trips and do interesting things to like Russia.
He did. We were in Zurich together at a car show, Geneva actually, and he told me when we were leaving the hotel, I said, well, I'll see you back. He goes, well, I won't be back for like 3 days. I'll see you then. But he goes, I'm chasing something that I've chased. What he followed up was when the Germans, when everybody came into Berlin, the Third Reich had a motor pool, and the Russians were the first one to get to the motor pool. We were trying to get all the V-2 rockets and the scientists, and they happened to end up with all the motor pool. They put them on flatbeds, took them back to Russia. And he spent a long time chasing all those cars down. And one of them was, well, two of them ended up being the parade car, the 770K parade car from Berlin, his personal car from Berchtesgaden, and then he kept chasing cars throughout the years, and that trip he pulled out a 770K two-seat roadster, the only one ever built, and he bought it from Joseph Stalin's nephew, and it was sitting in a outside parking area covered up.
Is that the red one? Is it a red car?
It's red now. It was white
now, yeah.
when he acquired it. And it was pretty, he used to go to Maharaja's houses back in the 60s and just knock on their door. And he pulled most of the Maharaja cars out. He pulled a lot of the great cars, the great Mercedes out of behind the Iron Curtain. And he did that before the wall fell and paid cash for the 770K.
Now, I've been to Russia. And when I went to Russia, I brought a passport, I brought an American Express card, and a couple of traveler's checks. What did Tom bring with him?
He brought $5 million in a briefcase from Zurich to Russia, and he paid cash for the car, which I thought was insane.
Yeah.
Flew Aeroflot there, and then he rented a Flying Tigers plane, which I think now FedEx bought them, I think. But
They
back
did, as a
then
matter of fact.
it was Flying Tigers. Took the car to the airport and told him that car is going on that plane, and flew it out of there.
And how do you get Stalin's present from the Third Reich on an airplane, an American airplane?
He persuaded the guards that were there.
In a way only he could.
In a way only he could. He was very gregarious, and I think these guys were blown away by his personality, like, this guy is nuts. And you'd had to have known him. He was not bashful at all.
No. Collected firearms as well?
Yes, he had a Gatling gun in his living room, several guns that Von Dutch had built for him, a set of dueling pistols that Von Dutch had made for him.
Yeah.
He had a very eclectic home.
So he's off with $5 million in a briefcase in Russia, and you were at home doing some work.
Yeah, I learned to metal finish. I couldn't afford a Porsche 930S, although I loved them, so I built one out of a 911. I rolled the fenders. In that car, I welded the rear quarters on it, built the rockers, and started actually producing kits to turn 911s into 930Ss.
Okay, do it yourself, but then you decided to do this for some friends of yours.
I did a lot of cars for Tom, Don, and my father over the years.
Who's Don?
Don Williams. He used to be with us at Barrett-Jackson. That's the after picture of that's the K6. So this was, this pair of cars were made for the Baron and Baroness Rothschild. This was her car, the town car, and then that was a fairly easy restoration. The J12 was a lot harder to restore.
That's interesting. You know, so when I chat with my guests, we talk about pictures, and I get the pictures from the guests, and this car, so this is what it
That was the
supposed to be.
rendering. Dutch Darren did the rendering of the car, And that's that and one picture of it at the Olympia Auto Show were the only two things I had to go by to put the car back to the way it should be.
But this is what it looked like when you got it.
Yes, it had quarter windows put on it, a rear window put in it, a trunk put on it, different bumpers. The roof was welded solid. It was no longer a town car. The front fenders were changed, and the front bumper was changed.
So you literally excavated the back of this car.
Yeah, I had to take it all apart, all the skins off of it, re-roll the back of the car, re-roll the front fenders, build bumpers for it, and make the top work again as a removable
And for
town
the avoidance
car.
of doubt, when you say you were doing this, it's your own two hands working on these cars.
I metal finished that whole car myself.
Wow. Now, you did this not just for those cars, but you took on another project.
Several. This is actually a set of that's the front fenders to the J12 after I put the fronts back on. They used to be a big round curve.
Then you went
I don't know
back.
if it had a wreck. Well, this was a Delahaye that I did here. That's the way it came. Somebody took it apart in Europe and couldn't figure out how to put it back together. It came in a container, disassembled, and I mean disassembled. Engine, transmission, rear end, all the wood was gone. They had tried to make new wood, and for those that don't know the way cars were built back then, they made wood. The bucks were that the skins went on in the body itself, and then the aluminum is taken around them. Well, I mocked the car together. The top wouldn't close. The door was about that far from fitting. I'm like, I see why they gave up. This is after I mocked the car up. I had to build new chrome for it, new hoods, new bumpers, and I metal finished the whole car.
Now, I got to admit, this is a different looking Delahaye. Who originally designed that body?
Fagoni and Falaschi. I added a little of the chrome to make it a little sexier. It had been beat up pretty bad. And a lot of the cars in Europe, because the curbs are so high, the sides of this car were just ground to death. It was missing the bumpers. It had a Cadillac engine in it, which was pretty common for a lot of those cars.
Why did they do that?
Because just to update them, the Delahaye engines, they were straight sixes, and quite a few of the Fagoni or Sawchuk body cars ended up with Cadillac drivetrain in them. People, they wanted a V8 later in life. Most of those things were done in the 50s.
Was it a reliability thing or power?
Power.
Yeah. Speaking of sexy, here's someone modeling with a car.
Yeah, that's right after the car. I think I had sold the car, and that was just before I shipped the car out.
So who are the people in this picture?
Tom Barrett is sitting on the chair next to me, and Bob Lee, and Tom Barrett's girlfriend, Carol.
Now, you're an interesting case in that your family, would you say, it's safe to say that your family was really into the car hobby?
Oh, very much. We grew up, that's all we ever did, was either restore cars, show cars, sell cars.
And put aside the show, put aside the auction, what kind of people would come to your parents' house?
Oh, quite a few. Phil Hill used to stay there at our house. The different curators of the museums. Bill Hara, we knew him very well. We were actually in Reno when Bill Hara died.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the guys, Barrett, by selling 10,000 cars over his lifetime, we used to have a suite at Indy, and a lot of the guys that have the major collections, even still today, would all come with us to Indy, and it's like a family.
So you knew these guys well before we see them on Speed with you or now Fox on TV. So you've known these guys all your life.
Yeah, basically since I was a kid, yeah.
And it kind of comes full. Let's go back to that picture. So Bob Lee is in that picture?
Yes, we sold Bob Lee, I don't know how many cars, a lot.
What collection does he own?
It's his private collection, but he's in Reno. He has tried to put together as many of the great Harris cars back together, and we helped him do it.
And who owns those two Hispanos you worked on?
Bob does.
Bob Lee.
He'll be showing them next year at Pebble Beach.
Awesome.
As a pair.
So let's talk a little bit about Brian. So now you've got an auction at this point. How old were you when you first started, when the auction started in 71?
I was in 8th grade.
So what were you doing? What kind of jobs did you have?
I emptied the trash cans. Then the next year I ran the drivers, which was before I had a driver's license. And then I started just working in logistics. And then around 1980, I was taking at ASU computer sciences and
Fellow
business.
Sun Devil.
And
Fork 'em
I
Devils.
computerized the office. We were still running it all off all manual flat spreadsheets. And I just worked my way up through the company. Now, the auction was only one a year. So the rest of the year we restored cars. And then around,
Was the car wash still around?
no, my dad sold the car wash around 73, I think. And then he just restored cars and started putting them in the auctions. And we would restore cars all year round, show them still at Pebble or the Grand Classic, and then bring them to the auction and sell them and then start over every year. And
So that first auction, who was technically the owners of that auction?
oh God, that's a tough question. Dean Cruz was our auctioneer. My dad and Tom put in all the cars.
How many cars were there?
80. Barrett had 40. He was, as we say, having a change in his domestic relations. And he needed to be liquid. And he sold all his cars. And then within a few years, he bought a lot of them back. Many of Tom's cars went through his hands several times.
Yeah.
But that auction, we sold the first car for over $100,000. And back then, Duesenbergs weren't even bringing $20,000. We sold the parade car, the 770K parade car, for $153,000, which was unheard of
At the
money.
time in 1971.
Yeah.
That's over $1 million today, $1.5 million.
In that car, the last time I tried brokering that car, somebody offered 15 for it.
Wow.
So it's done better than the escalation of money.
Wow. So 40 cars were Barrett's, that leaves 40 other cars.
20 were my dad's and 20 were other people that helped us with the Fiesta, mostly all local car people. There's actually quite a few for a long time, car collectors in Arizona that moved there, and more have moved there ever since
I
because
can
they
vouch
like
for
the
that.
weather. It's a great place, even if they don't live there full time. They build their garages there, they store their cars there, and
I never understood why the roads are so straight there, though. It's not, you got to get way out of Phoenix to get some interesting driving roads.
yeah, it's laid out as a grid,
Yeah.
unless you drive around through the mountain areas. But
Yeah.
yeah, we have a lot of great areas to go, a lot of great road rallies we do there. You know, within a 45 minutes, you can be doing Yarnell Hill,
Yeah.
or you can be heading up to Prescott, or between Bumblebee and Strawberry up in those areas, and it's just winding roads forever.
I remember back when I was in college, I used to go to my part-time job on Papago Parkway there, not far from where your second
That's
auction
where the
spot
second auction site was.
Yeah, I used to scream through there in my
So did
little
I.
Toyota Supra, yeah. Yeah, I should have raced you back then. So the official first auction was what, the Scottsdale auctions? That was the
Yes.
name of it? But there was a slang term for it.
Barrett-Jackson. Everybody called it that. It was, the auction company's name was Scottsdale something, another auction company. I forget what they called it. Dean was the auctioneer, but everybody said we're going to Barrett-Jackson. So we just
And same
adopted
stuff.
that.
Yeah. So you were doing all these jobs and throughout, like, literally trash cans all the way up to computers. What was Brian doing?
He really ran the auction with my dad, with Tom, and the early years, Don was involved on Barrett's side, doing the logistics and coordinating.
Did Don Williams ever have ownership in Barrett-Jackson?
Twice,
Twice,
yeah,
both on the Barrett side.
yes.
Wow.
First when we started, then Ken Behring hired him to go build Blackhawk. And then when Tom was getting on in his years, he had Don come back for a while and help him. But he didn't get along that well, I don't think, with the kids, with Tom's kids. And he just went back to Blackhawk and ran it.
Bring me through to about 95. What went on in the family in 95?
Well, 93, my father died. 95, my brother died. But, you know, the auction had grown. We'd gone through many different years. We started the auction and then we hit the gas embargo, and I can remember having to go down and stand in line with 5-gallon bucket, 5 gallons to get gas for the cars. Nobody seemed to want to ship them to the auction with any gas in them. I remember that. Still amazes me. You're going to sell a multi-$100,000 car and it has no gas in it.
Even today?
Oh, even today. Yeah, we still go through hundreds of gallons of gas and batteries. I'm like, really? So we just plan for it. And a lot of people leave the car stored, or they leave them with hardly any fuel, and they tell their guy, well, I'm going to sell it. Nobody thinks, let's put gas in it or a fresh battery. So we go through a lot of gas and batteries at the auction. But we went through several different years there of the gas embargo, and then the Carter years of hyperinflation, and then Gulf War, which
1991.
started the night of our party. So I go to the party, I'm like, where is everybody? And I'm living in this vacuum of got to build the tent, got to get the stage ready, got to do this, got to do that, go to the party. I'm like, where is? Oh, they're home watching the war. What war? So I go into the bar at the place where we were holding the party, and everybody's supposed to be at the party is around the bar watching us start bombing Baghdad. And it was an interesting auction. Rather than having the bid screens up, we had CNN on one screen and the bid screen on the other side.
Oh,
so otherwise everybody was going to be just watching the war.
Yeah.
So we had to make the two merge together.
But that was a tough time for the classic car world.
It was. That we had hyperinflation of car values, 88, 89, 90, and then 91 with the Gulf War. It just turned the switch off. So it was a couple of bad years. Then in 93, my father passed away. 2 years later, my brother passed away. So it was my turn to run the company then. And things had started to change.
So, okay, so things did change. So here's your first venue. This is currently a Mercedes dealer in Scottsdale.
Correct. That's the Safari Hotel next door. And where that tent is in the front, the red and white tent, is actually the showroom for a Mercedes dealership. Ironically, that's where we sold both of Adolf Hitler's cars.
I wonder if the people who are buying Mercedes there know they're buying what the previous Mercedes were sold.
Yeah, and it made world news. They held up we timed the sale of the car to go on CBS News with Roger Mudd so they could announce it right when it sold.
So TV way back in the day.
TV, we coordinated way back then.
So you were quite the trendsetter. And then this is where you and I used to race cars, and you held an auction.
Yep, that's Phoenix Municipal Stadium. That would be, we moved out of Scottsdale in 1979, and we moved back to Scottsdale in 1989.
And about that time, well, not 89, but 90, so 95, you take over. 97, what happens?
Well, 96, January 1st, 1996, Speed Vision was born. I had already cut a deal with Roger Werner to televise the auction. First year we did live to tape and then showed it. Next year we went live.
97.
97. And we did 3 hours on Friday, 3 hours on Saturday.
How'd that go?
It went well. It was a ratings phenomena from day one.
Yeah.
And since then, like this year in Scottsdale was our another milestone, first time ever live 2 hours on broadcast television.
Fox, though.
Fox broadcast television. Fox bought Speed Vision in 2001.
Yeah. And by this time you're on Speed Vision, you were at Westworld at that point?
We were at Westworld. That was our first year at Westworld. It rained like mad. You can see where all the driving lanes are. It turned into a quagmire. It took us a while. Then I started doing TV shows. This was Car Search, where I showed people how to go buy a car. And
you helped me decode a Corvette on that show.
Did I?
Yeah, way back when.
Yeah, I answered a lot of emails. We had one funny one. This guy kept asking us a bunch of questions, and he wanted to buy this Shelby. And we told him what to do. This is back in 2000. And we told him what to do, and he's like, well, this guy says if I don't wire him the money right away, I'm going to lose the car. I'm like, you don't want to wire somebody you just met over the internet money without physically going there, and I go, besides that, you need to drill the Shelby tag, turn it, get the Ford number, give us the Ford number, and we'll tell you whether that's the original body for that Shelby. And this guy was really anxious. He had watched my show on how to decode a car, and he was just so, well, I'm going to lose the car, I'm going to lose the car. Cut to the chase, after multiple things going back and forth, he finally told the guy, no, I've got to come see the car. The guy emailed him back, well, that's going to be impossible because I'm in prison. So, and he didn't actually have a car. So he would have been taken for a ride. And we answer a lot of questions like that. And I thought it was a very successful show at showing people what to look for. Now it's all reality TV, and it's all, we'll go out and, yeah, you can find a car and restore it in 6 days.
No, this was awesome. This
actually
show,
was real. This showed you actually what to go
Yeah.
do and what to do to go look at. Because different cars have different things to look at. And I tried to show people it's harder to do a General Motors car than a Ford or a Chrysler, because the 5th digit will tell you the engine it came with. With a Chevrolet product, you got to really do a lot more investigation. And as things have gotten higher tech, so have the way people phony up paperwork, protecto plates, broadcast sheets, everything.
So what are you doing? I mean, you're a large auction company now.
Well,
What are
now
you
we
guys
have
doing?
teams of experts, and teams of experts that actually control some of the guys, like the gentleman that started Pontiac Historical Services. He has all the build sheets of the Pontiacs. So he helps us decode, and we've used him for years, but now he's on staff.
And that's, if I come to you with a 59 Bonneville, you go to him no matter what,
We
whether
go
I
to
pay
him,
for
we
it
go
or
to
not.
Jim. Marty, who runs the Marty Report, does all of our Fords. He has the build sheets from Ford. Roy Sinar is, he's retired from NCRS now, but he's a master judge. General Motors has found and released more paperwork, so we try to really screen the cars, which causes ourselves heartburn when we resell a car that back then was cloned. But it's one of those things, you just got, if you don't clean it up, at some point, it's just gonna keep going down the road. You gotta draw the line at some point.
Yeah. There was an interesting point in your history. Remember back when Scottsdale got hit with the rains and the wind and Drew's tent went down? You guys made some changes to your facility with the city of Scottsdale.
Well, we had a structure prior to that. This is 2000. I got hit twice. I got hit in 99 when we had a pole tent.
And then you went to, well, that's
I went to the structure. So I went and bought that from Disney, the yellow and white structure. I said, I'll never hold the auction in a pole tent ever again. And it's one of those things where you see your life flash in front of you. I'm standing there and I see the tent start moving, and I'm like, I've seen this before. And broke 2 poles, had to evacuate the tent, fixed it, started the auction back up in 45 minutes. But I said, I'll never live through this again. So I bought that structure because I couldn't rent one that big. And I sold the F-88 in 05 in that tent for
remember that guy cried on stage.
$3.25 million. You couldn't have put another body in that tent. Fire marshal shut the doors. You couldn't put another person in there. So that tent only lasted 2 years. Then the city and I worked together after that to build a bigger tent, and then we kept adding on to it. And now where the auction goes, this is now the front entrance, all the way up where it used to be just the parking area. Now it's almost 1 million square feet under tent. And building, we moved the tents off the field that used to be prone to flooding all the time. So it's grown quite a bit. And now we have a building made for us.
So yeah, that was quite interesting. You even had bull riding.
We had bull riding because it's an equestrian center. We're like, what do we do with the equestrian part of this? And somebody threw, we had actually gone to the rodeo finals and had a blast. And we're like, this would be something new.
Yeah.
So.
You know, I've been to a lot of media centers in my life, but never one with a view onto bulls. Never in my life. That was a new one for
I could
me.
make a couple comments about that.
So you have an interesting partner here, because the reality is, anybody that's been to Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale area, the business is tourism. but you are like a turbocharger to tourism. What's
We
the
bring
relationship
$100
like
million
with Scottsdale?
of direct spending. And that's without an economic multiplier. So a Super Bowl typically is around $400 million to a city. If you put a 3 to 4 to 1 multiplier,
Yeah.
it's about that impact every year to the city of Scottsdale.
So what kind of things do you work together on with the city
Well,
of
we built this
Scottsdale?
building, just marketing, getting the infrastructure that we need. And every year we keep growing. You know, I'm one of the largest. We had 2 Guinness Book of World Records this year. One for that one big long tent is the world's largest single marquee structure, and all of it added together is the world's largest marquee, which is pretty impressive when you figure I'm going against World Cups, Olympics, Super Bowls, pretty big venues.
That's awesome.
Until this year, I was the largest user of electricity from a Greco for a single event. The city brought in a lot of electricity, a lot of infrastructure, and every year you got to just keep improving and doing things
Does that
better.
mean you have to start auctioning Priuses to like outweigh your footprint?
No. But next year we'll be selling the Ron Pratt collection, which will be pretty amazing.
Now Ron's an interesting dude.
Yes.
So put aside, let's not tell the audience who doesn't know one of his biggest cars. But how did he start? What was his first car he bought from you?
57 Chevy.
So what's a 57 Chevy worth?
Oh, it depends.
Back then.
Condition,
Back
20,
then.
25 grand.
And what's Ron's business? He's in the construction business, right?
Construction business, self-made man.
So would you say he's kind of your average customer?
No. Well,
Back then.
he is as far as, you know, when we first did, I'll back up. When we first did for multiple years on television, we only televised Friday and Saturday. Then everybody's saying, well, I can't afford to go to Barrett-Jackson. It's for elitists. You have to be a millionaire to buy a car. So then we started televising the early days to show people that you don't have to be a multimillionaire. You can come and buy a 57 Chevy, you know, 4-door. It doesn't have to be a Bel Air fuel-injected convertible. And some of the interesting statistics every year that we have, and it may be off 1 or 2%, but typically we'll end up with close to 50% of our registered bidders first-timers. They will buy about 40% of the cars. Then consigners that bought previously, coming back, selling a car, and buying a more expensive vehicle is our next biggest chunk of bidders. And people, we encourage them to do their homework. We do as much as we can, but really decide what, you know, I get this question all the time, what should I buy? Well, what do you like?
Yeah.
And then determine what to buy in your price category and buy the best car you can and then just keep moving up. And that's what people do.
Ron's a very interesting example of moving up.
He moved up
Quite a bit.
rapidly.
So what's some of the later stuff Ron has bought? He bought a $20,000 Chevy, we know that.
Well, he's been very well known, although the first few years that we were on television, he didn't want to be seen on television. He got a little bit more used to it. But he bought some of our most iconic cars. Bought the Futureliner, bought the Bonneville Special, bought the Super Snake.
What's the Futureliner?
That's the, General Motors made 12 of these for the Parade of Progress, which was a traveling motorama. And it showed futuristic things of the future. One of them actually had a device in it that was a modern, what ended up being a fax machine, where you could put a piece of paper in and it would come out the other end. Well,
And this is in the 50s.
this is in the 50s.
Yeah.
They were showing, it was like a traveling World's Fair motorama of technology and General Motors showcasing technology. And remember, General Motors owned a lot of other companies, Frigidaire, so they showed the kitchens of the future in one of them and technology of the future and all their concept cars that went on the road with them. Ironically, the year we sold the Futureliner, we sold the Bonneville Special, and those two cars were on the Parade of Progress together at the same time. So it made sense Ron owned both of them.
And Ron's based in Chandler, right?
Chandler, yes.
I remember seeing the video of you guys driving that bus down the freeway.
Yeah, he drove it home.
So he's not the average customer, but it's an interesting progression how he went. He started with here, way up here.
Yeah, and then he decided what he liked. You know, we've sold him a lot of cars over the years. Some he's sold. He decided he really liked American cars. I sold him some of the world's greatest European cars. Just didn't really have an affinity for them. He loves America and American cars.
So speaking of America, it's not just Scottsdale for you. You guys
No.
branched out. You started to branch out.
We did.
Where'd you go?
Went to Monaco in 2000, 2002 with the Monaco Historic Grand Prix. We had 6 auctions here, outgrew this venue, and did Orange County, Palm Beach. Now we do Reno, Las Vegas.
So how many auctions you do in a year now?
4. We like to do 1 a quarter.
Okay. And in terms of volume, how does it break out? Scottsdale's this? and what's-
Scottsdale did 113 million this year. Palm Beach will probably do 22 to 24, which is about typical for the other 3 auctions. Vegas this year did really well, though. It did over 32 million, so it was a strong auction.
Well, so Scottsdale's still the...
It's the biggest in the
bellwether.
world as
Yeah.
far as the kind of volume that it does
Now,
at quantity. It's hard to have quantity and quality together.
And
That's
you-
why you put out a book with 745 pages of catalog.
well, here's... You've broken it out nicely. You've got here with a bunch of great cars and affordable cars. And then what's this?
The Salon Collection, which is our catalog auction. And we did 16 cars sold for $22 million.
What kind of cars were they?
Across the board, from the world's greatest Corvette L88 that sold for $3.85 million, Auburn's, Michael Schumacher, Ferrari, that was his primary development car when he really started to be dominant in Formula One. We had modern cars. We had Simon Cowell's Bugatti Veyron.
Saw that. Fellow owner reviews.
And it's a good, we try to have a great selection of all eras, all types of cars. Supercharged Duesenberg, dual cowl Phaeton, one
Yeah.
of 24 factory born with a supercharger. Talbot Lago, 2500, great coach work, you know, one-off concept car, the Belmont.
One thing I thought was interesting in walking the tents of the cars, so there is a lot of everything.
Oh yeah.
Why is it you guys have some late model stuff in there? Like, I'll see a late model Mercedes in there.
You'll see probably more of it even in Palm Beach. We try to cover the entire gamut from a lot of pre-war cars, more in Scottsdale, Resto mods. People like drivers too, and hot rods. We sell everything. And
But is there a certain kind of customer you're going after by putting, say, I'll make it up.
usually a wife
6-year-old
will like
Mercedes.
a modern convertible, and typically they are something special about them. Limited production, harder to get. There's reasons behind all of
Okay.
them.
You bring up the wife, and that's a very good example. You guys, it's no longer just a car auction.
No, it's a lifestyle event, and that's one of the changes when I took over. When I took over, it was primarily a place for just guys to go and buy cars. And I sent out every year a questionnaire to my customers. What do they like? What do they not like? And every year I take those down to the city. They don't like the bathrooms. They don't like the parking.
Your special partnership with the city.
Yeah, my partnership with the city. But the things I could change were the wives said I get bored, there's nothing to do, so I started adding galas and fashion shows and
Yeah.
lounges and vendors and interactive displays. And what people do when they come there, they'll come there, first few days you're looking at all the cars, then you're sort of determining which cars you want. And then one may come in the morning and one may come in the afternoon and one may come in the evening. And I try to create an atmosphere that there's something to do all day long while you're waiting for your car to come up.
So, we're not accountants here, but like a breakdown. Is this the bigger revenue driver, or is the auction?
The
bigger?
auction. The other is activities, and to make it something that makes it a destination. And I have people from all 50 states, this year right at 20 foreign countries that fly to Arizona just to come to the auction.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Speaking of the United States, for a while there was a lot of muscle cars at Barrett-Jackson. Now, one would say this is your proclivity, muscle cars.
Yeah, I bought that back in 1988. In fact, I'm wearing a Bloomington Gold t-shirt. I just left Bloomington Gold. I grew up in a gentleman had an L88 and a ZL1, and I always wanted a ZL1. I had three cars I wanted, a 67 L88, still don't have one in my collection.
Yeah, you could have bought one.
I know. Hemi Cuda convertible and a ZL1. And I bought this ZL1 from the original owner back in 1988.
And what'd your dad tell you when you bought
He
it?
told me I was nuts for buying an ex-drag car, what I paid for it. And I told him it's like buying a Jay Duesenberg of my generation.
Yeah.
It's a car.
And you made it into?
I turned it back into that with the original owner. He helped me restore the car. He had every original part still sitting there, but it was an archaeological dig. He would have a barrel, 55-gallon drum of alternators. We're digging through there, and he pulls it up and hands it to me. He goes, there it is. And I'd run through the number. I go, you're right. He goes, I know. That scenario went on for days. To assemble every single part. He had put away most of the NOS parts to restore it.
So how old are you when you bought this car?
I don't know, I was probably in my early 30s.
And how long did it
I
take you to
just
restore
finished
it?
selling the Delahaye. So
Okay.
I finished the Delahaye, sold it in '89. I bought this car, I think, I bought 89. I bought that car in '89.
Okay. And then you also, around the same time, decided to go on a trip to Pennsylvania.
I like buying original cars. I flew there. Now, this is pre-internet, so you couldn't really look at the pictures. I saw an ad in Hemmings, not for this car, for a 1970 Ram Air 4 Judge convertible,
Ooh, nice
4-speed.
choice.
And I asked the guy about it. I go, you're back east, is there any rust? He goes, there's a little, but it's not bad. I fly back there, open up the trunk. I'm looking at my feet. This isn't a good sign. Open the door up, the door about falls off because the pillars rotted out. I lift up the carpet, there's a real estate sign for a floorboard. I'm like, little rust. There's little car left. This thing is totaled. And it was worse than that. The cowl was all rusted out. It was in bad shape. So I was irritated and went back to my hotel room, called my shop manager, told him, book me a flight home. And he goes, you're there overnight. He goes, look in the white pages, see if this guy still has his Hemi Challenger. And guy answers the phone and went over to his house, and he answered the door, and we talked for a minute. He goes, well, car's not here. This is my dad's house. The car's down the street. So we walked down the street. His house burned down, but he had a detached garage, and the car was still sitting in the middle of an empty field in this garage, in the garage with all his personal effects piled on top of it. Had not driven it since 1977. Typical story of the era. He bought the car the day he returned from Vietnam, and
New.
brand new. He street raced it. He spun a rod. Couldn't afford to get the engine fixed. I had to go get the engine from the machine shop out of Hawk, where it had sat since 1977. With a not too happy machine shop owner. I'm like, don't shoot the messenger, I'm here to pay the bill. Gathered up all the parts, put them on the U-Haul, drove it home, and then we turned it into that. Still sitting in my garage.
Wow.
Both those cars are still in my garage. That's a black on black pistol grip, 4-speed, super track pack Hemi Challenger.
So when this car rolled down the assembly line, you were emptying garbage cans in Scottsdale.
Yes.
Yes, you were.
These cars were brand new cars when we started selling collector cars.
Now, this brings up a good point here. You really focused on muscle cars. You kind of redefined what a classic car was with your auction.
I saw a generation change coming, and that's why I sell
Was it the
supercars.
cars or the age of the classic car people?
It was the age of the buyers.
So you chased the buyers.
Yes, you go to where we think the demand is going to be. Because the demand for the pre-war cars that Barrett was selling had pretty much dried up, other than the crown jewels. But just to buy a four-door, low horsepower LaSalle wasn't burning the doors off. So nowadays, I said, well, the baby boomers are going to start getting the generational change in money. They're hitting their spending time, and I love the cars because I grew up around them. So we started selling more post-war cars than pre-war. Prior to that, we were selling more pre-war cars.
And about the same time, you had two customers that stood out to you that you know very well right now.
Who were they?
Well, they helped run the show with you.
Oh, okay. Yes, Gary Bennett and Steve Davis. Steve used to bring about 40 cars, I think he peaked out at. Gary had come to every single Barrett-Jackson since the day we started.
Yeah.
And he sold his business.
Did he have the long hair when he first came to you?
Yes.
He did, so he's always had that. Okay.
He ran an architectural firm. They designed all the Walmarts, his architectural firm.
Really? You didn't tell me that. Learn everything new.
He's an architect by trade.
And now he's selling cars.
Yes.
Awesome.
Both of them are living their hobby, which turned into their business.
Aren't we all? We
That's
sit here in
why
a
we're
beautiful
lucky.
car museum. Now, we've seen a lot of your classic cars, but it wasn't until you got older that you finally bought a new car for the first time.
First time. There I am.
Hell of a new car.
1997. That's at the Viper plant. I was sponsored by
Avenue?
Chrysler. They were going to make 50 blue and white Roadsters. This is the first year Viper had roll-up windows, air conditioning, and a real hardtop. And they told me they would allocate one of the cars to me. They let me order it the way I wanted it built. And I got to go back and watch it get built on the assembly line and got all the paperwork and all the stuff that is supposed to be at the dealership.
So how old are you in this picture?
Oh, God, I can't even remember how old I was, probably then. 36, I think,
So
somewhere
it
in
took you
there.
36 years to finally get yourself
Buy
a
a
brand
new
new
car.
car instead of these beat up old cars.
Yeah, and other than the collector cars I put away, that's still the only car that I really bought and drove every day as a new car.
You still have this car?
Uh-huh. I'll never sell that car.
There was someone interesting that helped development of this car that seemed to know you very well.
I know Carol. Yeah, I know him real well since I was a kid. I actually have pictures of my daughter Shelby, who I named after Carol, in his arms right after she was born. So I've known Carol a long time.
You didn't send me that picture?
I
So
couldn't
one
find
picture
it.
you could have sent me.
It's probably at home in Shelby's pictures. But yeah,
Well, I know her phone number. I'm going to call her and
known
get
him
pictures.
a long time. Carol, Phil Hill, everybody that was involved in Grand Prix and racing back then.
Yeah.
I grew up, remember, my brother was 14 years older, so I was just a kid. Babysitting for my brother was taking me to the drag races or to SCCA races, and I just hung out in the pits. That was babysitting. So
Babysitting for me, I think we built Legos,
yeah.
if that.
Mine was at a racetrack somewhere on a weekend or down at the restoration shop.
So you don't know this about me, but I've gone to your show a lot. Back when I was in college, because it was my local car show in January, and obviously when I got into the hobby. And your gala was almost his birthday party.
It was.
Yeah.
That was his 80th birthday party. We had most of the guys that drove for him and worked in his shop come to that event. So Gurney was there, and it was quite a star-studded event of the who's who of racing in the 60s and 70s.
Now, you said earlier in our conversation that you still had two cars from the family in like over 40 years have been in your family. And I think all of us in the room here would know and watching, the car hobby is one of generations, correct?
Yep, there I am in our first house in Arizona with my brother's first car, and that picture was taken, I can remember how old I was. It was taken in 1961, I believe.
And what's this picture?
I recreated it with my son, although I think he's a year older than I was when I recreated the picture, in front of the same house with the same car.
And notice the house is finished. It's
Yeah,
under
it's finished
construction.
now. Actually has a new owner at this time. My parents had moved out of that house.
Yeah.
But we still had the car. My brother sold the car, and my mom went and bought the car back. And he sold it to build a swimming pool at his house, and the car was coming up for sale. Still has the same license plate on it as when he drove it to high school. And she went and bought the car back.
Now, your mom, she was very involved in the business up until her last days, wasn't she?
She was. She went to the office every day. She did the accounting. So
So really, she was the big boss.
she knew everything that was going on. She opened all the mail every day, did all the books. At every auction, she did all the banking. So she was very involved. I think it kept her going until she was 90. That's when
Wow.
she passed away. But she was at the auction a month before she passed away. She passed
Wow.
away in February, right after the auction.
Wow. Now, you've passed so your parents, I guess it's fair to say, they have given you this gift of the car world, correct?
Yes, I guess. I mean, it
And
didn't
you're
seem like
kind
a
of doing the
gift.
same thing here.
I'm trying.
You're trying hard, I can see that. Here, son, this is a Ferrari. Help me restore this.
This is how we block sand. This is how we paint. Leading here.
And I want to point out, this is not from years ago. This is when?
This is probably a year and a half ago when I did the metal work on the Ferrari, and then we painted it last year, and it's getting assembled right now.
So you're still, with your own two hands, restoring cars.
Yeah, it's like therapy. I go out there, I metal finish that Ferrari. It had been a lot of bad wrecks, and then my son and I painted it together. I don't try to raise him exactly the way I was raised, which was at the shop every day, but I try to show him what all is involved with it. And actually, Shelby seems to really be more interested in the company now.
So the car girl.
Yeah, she likes it.
Yeah.
And she's,
Actually, I have to say thank you to Shelby. She was very much instrumental in pulling these pictures and putting these together. So big round of applause to Shelby Jackson.
yeah, she loves the social media part, but she's growing up in it like I did. I never tried to force it upon her. And when she went to high school, and she wanted to be a fashion designer, and then she changed her major to business and electronic media marketing, and really loves doing that part and loves that part of our business.
So, you know, I can imagine we've got plenty of questions like this, and I'm sure people ask you, you run this auction, what do you drive?
Well,
Couple things.
every day I drive usually a modern car, but I rotate the collector cars.
What's the modern car you drive?
Drive a Escalade, drive the Veyron. It's one of the highest mileage Veyrons in the world.
How many miles?
It's got over 14,000 on it. I think there's one now that passed it. It's got 17 on it.
Tell me what a karma car is.
Karma car, I call those when somebody reneges at the auction and I step up and buy the car. And there's a couple in the picture there. My 427 Cobra, guy bought it, didn't have the money.
Yeah.
One of those Shelbys in there, and the Ford GT, and the Gurney car. The Gurney car wasn't a guy reneged it, that was Speed made some wrong comments about the car that really irritated the consignor. We're in the middle of the auction, he hops back in the car and drives off, and we're like, where's he going? We're all looking at each other, did we miss something here? He answered his cell phone and he's like, he couldn't hear, he's like, and he hops in the car and he drives off. And we're like, okay, now what do we do? So one of the guys went out and grabbed him, and he said, oh, they said the car was made from air, and it was this, and it was that. I don't want to sell it now. And I said, we'll make this right. I said, what do you want for the car? He told me. I said, I'll buy it. So
Awesome.
I'm glad I did. It's a great car.
It's an awesome
Every
car.
one of those cars, I call them karma cars, have brought me good karma. They've been great cars. The guys, as I say, you're going to flunk the IQ test on passing on a 427 Cobra at $250,000. It's a gift, trust me.
So much so you buy yourself.
Yeah, and the Veyron, a guy bought that at the Vegas auction, and right after the hammer dropped, he headed for the door, and Gary saw him. He's like, where are you going? He goes, I didn't mean to buy it. Well, you did. And not only did you buy it, you bought it on live television, and you were the last bidder for about 3 minutes. You had plenty of time to let us know that you didn't want to buy the car.
Yeah.
And so we circled the car back around after Steve and Gary going and meeting with the guy for a while. Then they came up to me and they go, the owner, we have to sell this car. The owner, he had already bought another car, so we ran it back up on the block. We reopened the bidding up. Well, the guy that was second high bidder bought the car after the Veyron, which was a McLaren. He goes, I came for McLaren or Bugatti. I didn't come for both. And the third high bidder, she was already in her plane flying out, and she goes, it was a heat of the moment.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in the reality of how much my plane cost me to operate. I don't think I can afford a Veyron and a new plane. So I ended up buying the car.
So, Craig, one of my favorite cars is a 1961 Aston Martin DB4 GT Zagato. Mm-hmm. They made a total of 19. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, I syndicate the show, make a ton of dough, and finally can afford one of those cars, and I talk one of those owners into selling me that car. I would jump at the chance. Mm-hmm. You had a similar story, but you didn't jump at the first one.
No, I've always wanted a Hemi Cuda convertible. And there's a gentleman in Arizona that has 5 of them. Actually, at one point, we had about 2/3 of the production sitting in Arizona between 4 collectors. And as one would come up, I'm like, I don't want a column automatic car. I don't want a bench seat car. I don't want a green car. And so I kept turning.
They made 14.
They made 14. So the guy that was helping me hunt these down, he goes, you can't be that picky when they only made 14. And then he came up with a plum crazy white one. I said, that's the car. And I had actually told him I want a high impact color car. And I was really sort of picky. I told him originally I wanted a 4-speed, but when this one came up, it's an automatic, it's fully optioned Hemi Cuda convertible.
How long ago did you buy it?
I bought that car like in '02, I think. So I've had it quite a while.
Got it a while. And then here's our gurney car, which you're not getting back. Thank you for the donation to the museum. Terry will give you a receipt, a tax receipt. Very kind of you.
And my other Trans Am car, which is, my brother actually restored this car. My brother vintage raced. One of the other cars in our family collection is the 34 Shelby ever built. And that's what my brother used to race. And then he restored this car, but he never raced it. He passed away before he got it race ready. And I was invited to Goodwood with the Trans Am group, so I finished the car, took it to Goodwood, then I started campaigning the car. And that's the gentleman, he's recently passed away, Jerry Grant, who raced the car in 1969, and then that car became Donahue's mule car for developing the car that ended up, ultimately in '71 winning the series.
So you went over to Goodwood Festival of Speed in an AMC.
I did, and the first day I ever drove that car was up the hill at Goodwood, because the car hadn't been finished. I was in Europe. I met the car in Europe, and it had sticky notes all over it. One of them was, bed the brakes, do this, do that. I'm like, well, where am I going to bed the brakes going up the hill? So I started it according to the instructions, drove it up the hill, and then first time ever up the hill. And they say there's one of the sticky notes was, brake early before stone wall. So I go up the hill, I'm screaming up there, all of a sudden I see a stone wall, I start hitting the brakes and they had never been bedded in. I'm like, must stop car, must stop car, must stop car, must stop car. And scared myself a little. I bedded the brakes in at that moment and made the turn and went up the hill.
Yeah, that's an interesting place. There was, when they did the first Ferrari Fiorano, the driver, it was a yellow one, the driver did not heed that warning, and a brand new pre-production Fiorano went straight into the hay.
At least he didn't hit the wall.
Got that going for him. Yeah, something tells me he's not driving Ferraris anymore. But anyway.
And there's the gurney cars in that picture behind
Yeah.
there. So sometimes we race both of them. Gary will race one of them and I'll race the other. Gary's a very good driver too.
Really?
Oh yeah, he's a good shoe.
You got to come out and hang out with Gary more often.
Yeah.
Come to Arizona.
Gary's vintage raced for a long time. He used to have a Trans Am car and he campaigned it for
Yeah.
several years.
I know that Steve's a Ford guy.
He's a Ford guy.
What's Gary into?
Gary likes a little bit of everything. I
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily put him, I have everything in my collection, although I love Hemi cars, but I love General Motors cars, and just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Gary, over the years when he was a customer, he bought a little bit of everything.
Okay. Speaking of everything, I want to play a game with you. I'm going to try
Okay.
something a little bit different here. Lightning round.
Okay?
Think of this as kind of a game show. I'm going to show you some pictures of some cars, represent some segment. I want you to tell us in the audience where you think that segment is going.
Okay?
Fair?
Sure.
Okay. If you win this, you get your car back.
We don't know there's a definitive answer until the future comes.
That's exactly the point. You see that it's rigged? Okay, that's how we play in New York. First one, pre-war. Where's it
Well,
going?
that's a LeBaron Duesenberg. The pre-war cars that are large displacement, exotic coach work continue to go up. And the analogy there is you didn't have to grow up with them, just like you didn't have to grow up with a Rembrandt. They are seen as motoring art, very rare, limited production, high horsepower, that car especially.
Do you think the average will continue to go up, or not the average of the prices, but the average cars? Will they go down as people age, go up? What's going on?
Well, you've already seen the sort of, as I said earlier, a four-door sedan, low horsepower, high production.
Packard 120 kind of thing?
They just don't have a huge following.
Yeah,
A supercharged Duesenberg,
with a LeBaron body.
with a LeBaron body, rare, limited production,
Okay,
will keep going up.
let's change it up a little bit.
Those cars have really gone up, and I predicted that years ago. It was a lost era for the car makers. They were basically graphics kits, but
170 horsepower.
yeah, 170 horsepower, smoggers, couldn't get out of their own way. But Smokey and the Bandit made those cars. But there's a whole generation that grew up in the late 70s and into the 80s that those were the cars that they wanted, and they've really gone up in value.
This car sold at your auction in Scottsdale this year. What did this car go for?
I don't know, we had about 10 of those, and they ranged from the mid-20s to, God, I can't think of what the highest one brought, 40, somewhere in there.
Wow, it's amazing. And this was just a used car at one point.
I predicted a few years ago they'd start hitting the 30s when they were stuck in the low teens.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Don't you have a 73 or 74 Super Duty 4-speed?
I have a 74 Super Duty.
Those are $100,000 cars.
Yeah, we sold one in the auction for 121 plus buy fee. It brought 132.
Wow. Dick Winkles, who is the chief engineer of the engine of the Viper you bought, he has a Super Duty, and I had to talk him out of selling it. He was going to very foolishly sell it, so you tell him not to sell it.
They're going to keep going up. That's why I have one in my collection.
Okay, you hear that, Winkles? This is for you. Next one. This is a little bit in our family here. This is one of our board of directors owns this car. Big Ferraris. Where are they going?
That's it's a worldwide demand. It seems to be, you know, especially short wheelbases.
Does this mean that this does not, the Firebird doesn't have worldwide demand and this
Not
does?
as much, although you do have a lot of students that went to the United States that, you know, one of the biggest, Carlos Monteverdi, big Ferrari collector, also collected one of the greatest collections of American muscle cars because he went to school in the U.S. A lot of students that went to the school in the U.S.
Oh, Nikolai Bulgari with the Buicks.
Yes.
Buicks, yeah.
They want to bring them back to their country. A lot of students that went to ASU back when we did were from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. They love American cars there. But your question about the big Ferraris, you know, I was up in the boardroom earlier and there's a picture of my old California Spider up there. I thought I killed it when I sold that car for $1.1 million.
What's it worth now?
Probably 12, maybe 14. I bought it for the original owner for $700,000, sold it for $1.1 million, and the only reason I sold it is I couldn't fit in the car. I bought it to go do the Colorado Grand in.
Should have kept it.
I should have kept it.
Yeah.
I drove it around the block, and I looked like Lurch in the car. I'm like, I don't see me having a long love affair with this car, although it was a piece of art. I loved the car.
Oh, it's a stunning vehicle.
You know, there's only so many of the rare Ferraris, but you see it in Gullwings, you see it in a lot of the European sports cars.
We'll
all
get to
keep
those.
going up.
We'll get to those. Something on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, which is sitting next to your car,
Yes.
and that is
I've also
John
said
Morton
that
there,
those
by the way,
cars,
who raced that thing to victory.
those cars keep going up in value, although I don't know if they're worth. It takes a lot to restore them nowadays too, to get the parts to really build them right. But they've been going up in value over the years.
Is it the kind of thing that'll keep pace with inflation, or it'll be like the Ferraris where they hockey stick?
I don't know if they're going to hockey stick necessarily. I think you put those like with the, 70 to 85 Trans Ams. They're nostalgia. A lot of them, we've sold Pintos, Vegas for astronomical money, and every time we sell one of those that's new in the wrapper, it's somebody's first car. And those were a lot of people's first car.
Great first car.
They
that
were.
one is signed by the designer of the car, the original designer from back in the 60s. And then something from our vault downstairs. Talk about German cars. This is downstairs in our vault.
Porsches have gone on fire in the past 2 years.
Crazy.
356s, early 911s, 911Ss. What happens when you look at what Ferraris have done, especially Dinos. When Dinos pass Daytonas,
600 grand?
I'm
That's
like,
crazy.
this is nuts. All of a sudden, 356s and 911s look cheap. So that's caused these cars, really, and there's a huge Porsche following. I loved Porsches for a lot of years.
So much so you made your own.
Yes.
Now, let's go back to the Gullwings you talk about. Gullwings and the Roadsters. Recently in Scottsdale, there was one that went, there were many. Every auction had one. You had a beautiful one. And you had a great show. Who drove over the stage?
Sir
with it?
Sterling Moss came up in our Gullwing, and it was quite an honor to have him. First time he's ever done that at any auction.
Where does he have a home?
In Scottsdale.
I didn't know that until you and I met. So go back to Gullwings for a minute. So Gullwings, what happened to them from 89 to 91, 93?
We sold one in 1980 for $106,000. First time a Gullwing had ever broke that mark. Prior to that, they were 30. My dad had a ton of them over the years. Rudge-wheeled Gullwings, alloy, block 60, later Roadsters. We actually had the car from the Gumball Rally the two English guys drove. We've had almost every car from the Gumball Rally. But that car, my brother actually bought it here in LA and drove it home, back when they were $20,000 cars. I've had multiple Gullwings of my own. They're great cars, and all of a sudden they just took off. And we sold one 3 years ago, first one that ever broke 2 million. And last year we sold Clark Gable's just under 2 million, and the one this year over 2 million again.
But there's an interesting discrepancy, and this I think is not just Gullwings, but think about preservation classes now, survivors. So there was one that went for like 1.2 at one auction, a beautifully restored car. Same year, same kind of deal, but a complete restoration, I mean, really looked terrible. Went for 1.7. So what's going on in the preservation class?
It's getting more and more popular. Cars are only original once. After you restore them, they'll be restored. You can keep restoring them and keep restoring them. You know, several cars that I've owned over the years, you know, we didn't show a picture of it, but I pulled a 71 Hemi Roadrunner out of England, and I was really torn whether to restore the car. But it had so much surface rust, but the interior was like brand new. Several cars, when I'll restore them, if it's just really ratty, try to leave as much originality in the car that you can. But barn finds tend to, you know, we sold a barn find Boss at the auction this year. Same thing. I told the guys, I was fast and loud guys, I go, leave the dirt on it. They detailed it up. I'm like, the car will do better if you drag it out of and you just bring it up on the block like that.
Yeah, and it did.
It did.
It did, of course it did. So would you suggest someone with that same delta on all cars, barn find versus
Not all
restored?
cars. You know, it's got to be a desirable car to start with. But, you know, you see it in Ferraris. You see ones unrestored bringing more than restored cars.
And then this represents a couple of things, this picture. Supercars, which I think the Z28 will be a supercar.
That was up there because that's one of our charity cars. That was a VIN number 1 Copo. But supercars,
modern
Ford
like Ford
GTs,
GTs, that kind of stuff.
I put away a GT back in '05. I don't say put it away, it's got 2,000 miles on it now.
Did you buy it new?
Bought it new.
Okay.
And, you know, they're only going to make so many of them. The reason I bought the Viper is growing up, when I went to high school and I graduated in 1977, we talked about the Trans Ams and the Z28s. There was nothing really for somebody that liked horsepower to go buy. So my dad did a deal with me to buy a car, and I ended up with my actual first car for my senior year was a 68 Corvette big block. I never thought that you would see high performance come back. That's why I bought the Viper. I'm like, how long are they going to make 400 horsepower cars or 450 horsepower cars? Now we're up to 1,000 horsepower car that meet emissions, are drivable, have air conditioning in them. I don't know if this era will last forever, and that's why I put the GT away, the Viper away.
What about like the $1 million supercars, like Paganis, P1s, that
Look
kind of
at
stuff?
what you know, F1 McLarens have done.
Crazy.
You know, they were $1 million cars. All of a sudden, they were 3. Then they were 5. Some have sold as high as 8.
Crazy.
You know, that's why I think the Veyron, you know, is the cars that most people have a desire for, and you've got a large appeal. You know, the salon is all about selling the top of the pyramid, but there's a much bigger, broader market.
Do you see another, like you had already talked about, from say 89 to 91, those big cars went like this.
Yeah, they dropped like a rock.
But in 2008, exactly the opposite. The economy fell off a cliff, but
People
300
wanted
SLs went from
assets.
200 grand to here.
When the 91 crash hit, you had a lot of people speculating and leveraged on the cars, and a lot of Japanese money, and their economy hit a 10-year just flat spot. And a lot of the cars that went to Japan, they bailed on them. And when you have that many people bailing on cars at one time, it caused a glut in the market. It's all supply and demand. Right now, there is a worldwide demand for the rarest blue chip cars. It's a different market.
And that's why the Ferraris are going to the
The
moon.
Ferraris, but all rare cars have been going up. That's why Gullwings have gone up. Even though they made, you know, quite a few more Gullwings, but there's a worldwide demand for them.
I thought it was interesting in Scottsdale. A Dino went for like $425, but then a BMW M1, they only made 272 of those, went for $375. Do you see that changing at some point? Do you see the BMW exceeding that?
That's a hard one because it's a much smaller market for those. We sold one. I sold one to Bob Lee actually for like $100,000 back in the late '80s, which was a lot of money for that car. So they haven't really spiked out. Same auction, I sold him a 4.9 Ghibli Spider convertible too.
That's right
For
up my
about the
alley.
same money. He averaged out there pretty well. He's averaged out on all his cars pretty well.
I'm going to switch to some audience questions now. And here's a great one that dovetails to what we're talking about. JD Hopkins. JD Hopkins asks, how do you feel about the growing Resto mod trend?
I like it for multiple reasons. One, it's giving a lease on life to cars that wouldn't, for the most part, ever be worth restoring. A 6-cylinder Camaro. But nowadays, Resto mods, you don't have to start with a car. You know, they're building new Camaro bodies, they're building new bodies for the Mustangs. So if you want a car, and almost every great collector that we sell cars to has at least a hot rod and a Resto mod in their collection, because you can go out, hit the key, it starts, it runs, it's got air conditioning, it handles, it's got all the modern technology, but it still looks, and Resto mods don't have to be a 60s muscle car. There's Resto mod Rolls Royces with all modern drivetrain underneath them, but usually they didn't start out with a really desirable car to start with. They started out with, as I said earlier, it's a 4-door with a low horsepower, it's a 2025, it's something that just isn't that great of a performance car. Now it's got a new lease on life.
Okay. So we saw that you do some racing. And I take my hat off to you that you take that car, Dan Garney's car, out and actually do some racing. Big round of applause for that one. I mean, you guys, before you leave, go and look at that car. But yeah, the whole car is cool, but look at the stickers of all the places that Craig has campaigned it. Speaking of racing, our very own friend Adam Martin, he asked a very interesting question of what sort of odd jobs were you asked to do or told to do in the pits? Remember you told me your brother made you do all the jobs he didn't want to do.
No, not in the pits, in the restoration shop. In our restoration shop, I did the sandblasting, steam cleaning. But you haven't lived until you've sandblasted or steam cleaned in Phoenix when it's 110 degrees outside. And you're in a rubber suit. Polishing, bumping and polishing all the aluminum, block sanding, and stripping. All the nasty jobs. I guess it built character. Those are jobs I didn't, whenever I'd come into work and he'd hand me, you know, the sandblasting equipment.
Yeah.
Tough day.
So I got a couple of questions here of people asking for your suggestions of future of cars to invest in right now or buy. One, Russell asked one with a manual transmission. Martin asked the same thing.
Well, I get asked that question all the time, and that's why earlier, you know, people had asked me years ago, you know, what's going to catch on next, and that's when I said that the Trans Ams, but even before that, it was the oddball cars of Buick GS Stage 1s back when they were really cheap. You got to look at the future, I think. Whatever is desirable for the generation that next is going to get its money is going to be the next collectible. You've seen through the years 50s cars have their run, 60s cars. Now we're getting into the 70s, into the 80s with the Trans Ams. See what the GNXs are doing. You know, whole generation that was the king of the hill.
And now FJ Cruisers. I mean,
Yes.
you guys did, what, 5, 6 of those?
Yeah. Range Rovers. You know, there's, now you talked about some of the BMWs, slope noses nowadays, you know, the 930s, the older 930s, they're all becoming very desirable because there's whole generations that grew up, those were the car. So just keep your focus on going forward as to what the generation is that's getting its money.
Okay. Hank asks an interesting question. You had mentioned that you had done auctions here and then you went to a bigger venue in Southern California. But now you're gone somewhere else. Why did you leave Southern California?
Multiple reasons. One, it almost seems like, and we had the same thing at the Petersen. A lot of my customers are from here, but they wouldn't come down to the Petersen because it's in their backyard. They like coming to an event. And then Reno was very aggressive, and we thought that you got a built-in audience there of 800,000 people and 6,000 cars, and a venue that was just turnkey for us. And it took a lot of money. We outgrew the hangar that we waited at Orange County for years for them to build first day. Thursday, the first year we were there, it was to capacity.
Wow.
So the next year we had to bring our big tent from Scottsdale. We tore it down, shipped it here, built it. A lot of expense. And the Reno venue just made a lot of sense for us.
Okay. Switching gears back to racing. We already saw a picture of that Javelin. What about an AMX? Would that be
Absolutely.
a better car to run up the hill?
Yep.
Yeah. Also racing, Adam again asks, what's one of your most memorable driving or racing events?
Oh, I've had several. That trip up Goodwood, I'll never forget that one, seeing that brick wall coming, or stone wall coming at me at a rapid pace. Racing, I've had a lot of great times. When I did the Monaco Historic Grand Prix, I was the official auction house. We had 1 hour at the lunch break to take our auction cars out on the track. And I took out a 300 SL Roadster, and Alan DeCatney took our 2.3 Alpha Monza out on the track. He passed me going through the tunnel like I was parked. And I had the whole talk with Alan ahead of time. Car hasn't been teched. It's an auction car. Don't know how good the tires are. Be kind to it. He blew by me, and then you get the chicane after you come out of the tunnel. I tried keeping up with him in a 300 SL Roadster. I came around the swimming pool, and I had it completely sideways, sidestepping it, cross. I'm like, don't crash the car. Don't crash the car. It's got to go to the auction. That was probably one of my most memorable times.
Fantastic.
I couldn't keep up with an old Alfa Romeo that hadn't been teched with a 20-year newer car, and I thought it was a pretty good driver.
Who's at the wheel of the car?
Yeah, the DeCatney was pretty good, and those
Yeah.
are his cars. But I couldn't believe he passed me the way he did in the tunnel.
That's awesome. Well, Craig, thank you very much for coming.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciated getting to know you and talk about them, and talk about really, you are a market maker.
Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Before I let Craig go, a couple of housekeeping items. We showed you that picture of a 2015 Camaro Z28 for a very specific reason, because our next guest, April 26th, is the design director. Do you know this man, Tom Peters?
Yes.
He is the design director, very nice guy.
Yes.
He's also the Lifetime Achievement Award winner from Art Center, his alum. He is the one that makes the C7 look like that and the current Camaro look like the way it does. He is going to bring, for show and tell, a 2015 Camaro Z28 here on April 26th, and we are going to have a discussion much like we just had with Craig. And then on May 3rd, Saturday, May 3rd, we're going to do something different again and speak to a guy who all he does is drive sideways. Vaughn Gittin Jr., Formula Drift champion. Very excited for you guys to meet him. And of course, please follow MotoMan on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, Petersen Museum on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, Barrett-Jackson. And with that, Craig, thank you again very much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
So for you guys here, we're going to go downstairs for a bit. We've got some Barrett-Jackson cars. You can do some signing.